Good afternoon and welcome to our April 9th Committee of the Whole meeting. The City of Parksville recognizes the people of the Coast Salish Nations and their traditional territory upon which we gather with gratitude. We have one presentation this afternoon, external from McElhanney Transportation Master Plan. A presentation by M. Browning of McElhanney to present a draft of the city's new transportation master plan. Hi, Matt. How are you doing? Yeah, I was confused with the external presentation here. So, okay, that's welcome. Come on up to the mic. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much for your time. So we'll do a couple of things here. One is a presentation that sort of summarizes the transportation master plan, what the intention of the plan is, how it's been crafted, how we've arrived at where we are, and then a quick overview of how the plan is shaping up. So it's not in its final state yet. We're hoping to get a little bit of feedback and insight from the group assembled here before we move into the final phase of refining and detailing out a couple of the last bits of it, but hopefully it's looking in good shape. We're getting pretty close. I know it's been a while, but we're moving forward as much as we can. So I'll start with just a quick introduction to the transportation master plan process. So this is a document that in essence sits underneath the OCP and helps the city to deliver transportation infrastructure that's consistent with the overall strategic goals and objectives of how the city is planning to grow and change over time. And we established this in a three-stage process. One was looking at what do you have, how is it working, what are the challenges, what are the opportunities. Second phase was what do we want to do about it, how do we want to move next, where are the potentials for new projects and initiatives. And then the third phase, which is where we're just sort of wrapping up, is how do we get there? What do we need to do in order to achieve the goals and objectives that we've set out as part of the plan? And that includes costing, implementation, phasing, monitoring, all the things that you need to do to move forward. So aside from the plan itself and what it does, there are a few things that we try to keep in mind as much as possible in terms of what the plan does for the city and the institution of the city. And so it's really important to us that the plan is an accessible plan, and meaning that in the broadest possible sense, that anybody living within the city or interested in the city should be able to engage with it and understand what it's saying. I've come across many transportation master plans in the past that are very, very dense, very, very long. The details and the findings and the recommendations are buried somewhere on page 87. We want this to be a very, public-friendly, public-facing document that people can engage with. It should be usable, so staff should be able to refer to it when thinking about capital planning. What are we going to do next? Let's look at the plan. That's very helpful. Thank you very much. It shouldn't be this document that gets put on a shelf and never really looked at. We need to demonstrate that we've put due thought into all the recommendations so that when the inevitable calls from constituents come in saying, why are you doing X? You can refer to the transportation master plan. There's a good reason for why we're doing X found in the plan. That should be defensible. And then I think one of the most important parts of this is pragmatic. I think one of the things we heard from the community from the last plan was not much of it was achieved. And sometimes that can be for a lot of reasons. But sometimes it can be trying to do too much or being too ambitious in your plans. So being realistic about the recommendations, let's just set out a plan for what we can do in the next 10 years. All these things should be achievable without too much of a stretch. They're all, within typical city budgets. There's nothing in there that's going to, break the bank or anything like that. We should be able to get through this process and complete the recommendations of the transportation master plan. So in 2035, when you're doing your new transportation master plan, you can think about what to do next, not how to do the things you haven't done yet. So those are the sort of guiding principles, as it were, that we were using going through it. So we've completed all the work for the transportation master plan all the way through the phases that I've just outlined, and we're in this final stage of the documentation of the transportation master plan right now. And when it really gets down to it, there's a series of recommendations across a variety of modes that are the crux of the transportation master plan. That's the bit where you want people to spend their time actually reading. what are you telling us that you're going to do? And those are broken out into the sections below. And we'll go through these as we go through this presentation, so I won't repeat them through. So the first of those items is planning projects. So there are a few things that it came to light that the city wants to achieve moving forward, but the process of the transportation master plan is not the right vehicle for understanding how those things are going to happen. So, for instance, there was a lot of discussion about circulation downtown, about parking downtown. These are sort of very specific to the downtown area and not necessarily something that fits within a broader transportation master plan for the entire city. So there's a recommendation there that a specific study, and these can be coordinated or delivered together, of reviewing downtown circulation, downtown parking as a means to unlock any additional benefits that you might be able to get there and properly understand how these things are used. And so that might take the form of a more enhanced parking study to see what the utilization rates are. The transportation master plan just identifies how much parking you have, but you can't get into the weeds on every single one of these different items and modes within the scope of this. And so that's something that bears a little bit more detail. So planning studies around that. There's improvements that can happen on Highway 19A. The more trivial of them is signal coordination to enable traffic progression. But the more ambitious one that drove a lot of conversation in the public engagements is this idea of reimagining Highway 19A. And it's something that we've talked about a fair bit. There was a lot of excitement around this to start the project. A lot of people were very gung-ho about what the future of Highway 19A, or Oceanside Boulevard, if we want to really reimagine this thing. As we move through the process and we sort of put on the table, here are some potential futures for this roadway, that excitement turned into a little bit of fear and trepidation and concern and desire for a better understanding of, well, what will that mean? How will this play out? What will be the implications? And so rather than, again, coming back to this pragmatic approach, rather than proposing, okay, so Highway 19A is going to be single lane in both directions, and then you're fighting a battle for the next however many years trying to get this done, the recommendation here is a study to establish a pilot project to gather some data. And that can be as simple as tree planters or bollards or signage, closing a lane for a short period of time, traffic counts to understand, okay, what does it actually do to the city when you lose a lane of traffic? Is it irreparable damage to the way that mobility operates in the city? Is it a minor inconvenience? Do people adjust quite easily? Does it cause safety concerns? And what are the benefits that you get out of that? Does it actually improve crossing capacity for pedestrians to access the waterfront from the downtown? You'll know. Out of that process, you'll have a better understanding of how things sit, and the community will have a greater idea that there's a transparent process, it's data-driven, it's got some evidence behind it, so that when you move forward and say, well, actually, this study shows that the world doesn't collapse, the sky doesn't fall in, it actually makes the city more livable and it achieves a lot of the goals we want, here's the data that shows it. And then that sort of greases the wheels a little bit for moving forward with that process. So again, trying to be pragmatic about how we get to the end goals that we're after. On transit, we obviously appreciate that the city is not responsible for transit service and routing and delivery, but we've had some really good conversations with BC Transit to understand what their plans are through the transit redevelopment strategy and what they need from the city in order to deliver that well. And so most of the transportation master plan is providing supportive language to say that the city will continue to work with BC Transit to achieve those goals, increasing transit mode share and ridership, and prioritizing a certain number of actions throughout that. And we include, it kind of flows out in white on the wall a little bit, but we've included what the transit redevelopment strategy proposes for new transit routing in the city, which I do think are an improvement on existing in terms of the coverage and the neighborhoods that it provides service to. And I think there are some additional benefits to have from that as well. We've got a series of quick progress items that we've included as well. And I've included a picture there. There are things that you can do very, very quickly with minimal extra deliberation, relatively low cost. And one of the key ones here are these rectangular, rapid flashing beacons. They could use a snappier title, I think. But RRFBs, just to enhance pedestrian safety at crosswalks. And we identified a series of locations where these are appropriate. We went to the community and asked do you have a priority? Do you have a preference? And there was some prioritization there, but in general, we have a long list of locations. As and when funding is available, you add another RRFB. So continually over the next 10 years, you can keep delivering those as and when, getting funding from sources like ICBC. This is a really effective way to improve safety on the roadways. A few other quick wins as well about things like curb build outs and improved lighting. And again, we identified a series of locations where these can be delivered and some priority around them. But again, it's an as and when process of delivery. The biggest ticket item that is recommended is actually fairly straightforward in terms of its delivery. So one thing we're looking at is this extension of the western lane from Roscoe to Bay on the Island Highway as you're leaving the city. It was identified in the initial rounds of the community engagement, and what essentially happens is you lose the curb lane, they merge together, and people sort of race up the inside curb lane to try and sneak in to get in ahead of traffic. A lot of those vehicles are trying to turn right at Bay anyway. And so there's this fairly simple alternative to that, which is to maintain the 2 lanes all the way to Bay, turn it into a right turn lane, alleviate some of the traffic congestion along that corridor. And there's a good win there for traffic management and improved safety as well. And so that we ran that by the community. There was a lot of support for that, a lot of feedback that was an appropriate way to go. And what it also does is it allows a little bit of a review of that intersection at Bay and Island Highway, which is quite close to Finholme Street, which is where we'd like to put some cycling infrastructure. Temple has bike lanes, Bay has bike lanes. How do you get from there to anywhere else in the city? This might be an opportunity to maybe make that connection. So it kind of feeds into a broader multimodal strategy as well. The other 3 are sort of intersection improvements, and we've got there Jensen Ave and Alberni Highway, the MacArthur Street intersection on the Island Highway, and Martindale on the Island Highway as well. And all 3 of those were identified at various points as being intersections that could really use some improvements, either for cyclist or pedestrian safety, for legibility for drivers, or as acting as a more of a gateway into the community or to the community park. So, but in various ways, all those 3 intersections that are dotted around the extremities of the downtown can provide a little bit of improvement with fairly simple modifications to the roadway. And so we've located these on a graph, and we've also updated some of the road classifications. We've added some new designations of active collector and active local. And this is really to give an indication of where we're trying to improve pedestrian and cyclist infrastructure on roadways and give a bit more clarity about what the intended purpose of those roadways is going to be. So moving on to active transportation. So for cycling, we've got 6 projects. And I'll maybe just skip to the graphic that shows where they're going to be. And I think the image there tells quite a good story about how well connected the city's cycling infrastructure becomes once you build out all these elements. There are very few places in the city where you can be and not be quite close to some form of cycling infrastructure once these are all built out, and they all manage to connect in reasonably well to the downtown area. And we're trying to identify them in areas where they make sense to connect existing lanes. So for example, the Shelley Road bike lane is a bit of a stub at the minute. It comes down from the Island Highway and kind of stops on Stanford. Doesn't really make a tremendous amount of sense. But if you continue that along Stanford, suddenly you're connected to the Caulfield bike lane. And now you've got this interconnected network that's serving the large groups of cyclists and e-bike users that the city has. Again, this is something that we ran by the community several times to iterate and find locations where this was most appropriate. And what we're trying to do is maintain this idea of cycling infrastructure. So there's no preconception of about what that means in terms of, is it a bike lane? Is it a MUP? Is it a separated cycle track? It's cycling infrastructure. And as and when you come down to that corridor improvement, you can have a look and say, well, what makes the most sense for this corridor? Because a roadway like Finholme Street, for example, is very low vehicle speeds, very low vehicle volumes, probably wouldn't be appropriate to build a separated cycle track at high cost when paint and delineators could do just as good a job. So on a case-by-case basis, you can provide the appropriate infrastructure for each of these roadways. For the pedestrian network, there's far too many locations to put handily on a slide. I've picked out the first 5 of 18 that we've identified as being the highest priority. And we worked with Access Oceanside on this, and they actually came through with a very rational and reasonable approach to how to categorize these locations based on usage and priority. And so that really helped to drill down to where the key areas are. But fundamentally, what we'll have is an idea of the specific locations where pedestrian infrastructure improvements are required, so that as and when development happens in the city, you've got that to point to say, hey, developer, you need to chip in because the transportation master plan indicates that pedestrian improvements are required on this roadway. So it just gives you a framework to continually build out that pedestrian infrastructure and continue to improve accessibility. So this has been a highly iterative process with the transportation master plan. And it's been a real joy to work on because I there's a lot of passion from the community, from a lot of different sectors. It's been great to have these conversations with different groups. And obviously not everything gets included. We have some pretty ambitious recommendations that we should pedestrianize the whole of downtown, all the way through to we should put a tunnel under downtown to get traffic from one to the other. Right. But again, coming back to this pragmatic, usable tool that the city staff should have available to them to make sensible, predictable decisions moving forward. And that's the goal of what the TMP is supposed to be. And based on that, we can maybe switch over to the actual TMP document itself, and I can just quickly go through that. Again, the content is being updated. The content has been refined. We're still having some conversations and getting some feedback and input. But this is to give you guys a flavor of what the Transportation Master Plan as a document is going to look and feel like. And the idea is that it shouldn't be, a big tomb of document there that's very scary for a citizen to look at and be like, well, I don't understand any of this. It shouldn't have pages and pages of traffic analysis outputs and things like that. It should be something that you can utilize pretty trivially as a readable document. So hopefully I think I should be able to steer through this. Let's do this one here. So we're delivering in landscape format. Majority of people tend to read these documents on their laptops, on screens. It's a much more effective way to communicate what's going on. There we go. So the document should be bright, easy to understand, easy to navigate through. What we'll have is each of these sections will be clickable, tabbed, so that you can get to wherever you need to go. There's an additional section 4 that's coming in that's going to be specifically about implementation. But for the most part, it's an introduction, how we develop the plan, what the plan is. There is no need in a transportation master plan for all of the fluff that sometimes gets added, where you have to wade through pages and pages of preamble or, the community profile. All this stuff is in the appendices. If you're really, really interested in how we did our traffic analysis, you can go in there and see what the signal phasing was at a particular intersection. That's cool. And I love doing that stuff myself. It's not for everybody. But each phase of it should be easy to engage with. So here's the introduction. This is how we did our study process, phase 1, 2, 3. We did an engagement study. If you want to read the full engagement report, go to Appendix A. Off you go. This is how you use a transportation master plan. Here are the sections that we have within the plan. If you want to know about X, Y, or Z, that's where you go to find it. This is what we're basing it on, the context setting of like how the community is. Nothing to dwell on, right? This is how we develop the transportation master plan. These are the existing conditions. This is the roadways we're working with. This is the mode share we have. Here are where the key intersections are. This is what the nature of the city is in terms of its multimodal network. And then based on that, what are the challenges, the opportunities, the aspirations that we heard from the community, and how did that lead into this vision for mobility and on those 4 principles of active, balanced, safe, and accessible, which have been the driving force behind everything. And then a little bit of discussion about what's coming in the future that's guiding away, but not getting too much into it. And then we get right on into here are the multimodal network improvements. And so you very quickly run through, here are the planning projects. Here's why we're doing them. Here's how long it's going to take to do it. Here's the cost of delivery. Quick progress wins. policy and guidelines changes. So we're working to try and make life as easy as possible for staff. And we might change the wordage on this to be less about specifically traffic calming and more about service requests that staff get. So they get a service request in. How are they supposed to deal with that, right? If you have a new technician starts at the city, how am I supposed to respond to this call for a speed hump on a roadway? Well, here's the guidance. This is what you go to, and it's just one page that you need to look at. There's a sensible process, and there's the industry best practice that you need to refer to. There's no need for the City of Parksville to reinvent the wheel on what active transportation design guidelines should be. BC has it. We've updated the roadway cross sections to provide guidance on that and indicated what the road improvement projects are. As we were talking about before, there's some graphics to indicate what we mean by certain projects. So that Roscoe Street extension there, that's broadly what it'll look like, give people an indication of how this is going to be. That's the pedestrian network improvements with the priority list included. And then onto cycling as well. And then you get into the appendices. So obviously the notwithstanding the implementation chapter, which just isn't quite ready yet. But then you get to the appendices, engagement, existing and future traffic conditions, and big maps that everyone can read. The whole thing should be 25 pages, and then appendices, which are stacked. But that should be a really, really easy document that everyone can engage with. Everyone can understand what is the city planning to do and how is it planning to do it and when will it happen. So nice and accessible, nice and usable, nice and pragmatic, and feasible, hopefully, as well. So that's where we've landed at so far. Hopefully I squeaked in under the 30-minute wire there. So apologies if I was speaking too fast, but I'm happy to take any questions that anybody has for the process or where we're at with the transportation master plan.
Sure. And just to capsulize and definitely open it up for questions in a second here. This now is online with it. So
no, not yet.
Okay. So you're anticipating this is going to be online?
It will, yeah.
Right.
Well, the final section, the implementation section, will be done within the next week or so.
Yes.
And then it's just this last round of refinements to tease out any typos and spell check errors. So we're imminently looking to put it out.
Okay. Yeah. Because what I'm getting is this as sorry. CEO Kaler, comment? Yes.
Thank you,
Thanks.
if I may. So once we have the final document, we'll table it at a council meeting.
Yes.
In its final version, and then it will go live with any council discussion or direction or anything further that you want to add at that time.
Right. Yeah. And thank you, because I just have questions to do with the very quick presentation you did here. Just like in the last one, active network improvement, pedestrian network. You said here's, I think, 5 or 6 of them, but you actually indicated that there was 18 that were on the list. You just highlighted the top 6 or something like that. Is it going to show the 18?
Yeah.
That's what that's my question. So that will be the complete report of everything. So,
yeah.
Because it's very difficult for council to make any judgments or comments on this because it's kind of vague and so forth, but without seeing the whole thing. And that 28 pages is reasonable for us to actually do so that we can actually scour it and make the questions. But yeah, that's my main question I had, knowing when it's coming forth. Councillor Gore, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. I've heard a lot of feedback from community members, how interested and enthusiastic they are. And you probably saw that in your public consultation sessions. So thank you for that work, and thank you for engaging with the public. This is really important, especially when I see the pedestrian, where you talk about page 14, the pedestrian network improvements. The Alberni Highway from Moss to Lee Avenue. That was one of the things I wanted to talk about. And I hear a lot from the public, especially with the new developments at the Despard block. And more I see people walking towards downtown. Even in the dark, and have friends who live in those apartments, and they keep saying how unsafe it is for them to be walking there. And I know it was on staff's radar to make those sidewalk improvements, and I understand that staff is aware of that. But this is really good to see that public was able to give you the feedback and provide all this information. It's really refreshing, and hopefully we can implement some of those recommendations coming directly from the public, in my opinion. So thank you for the work. It is very, very important. Yeah.
No, thank you.
So questions? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Beal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through to the delegation, I too want to thank you for the presentation today. This is something that I'm very, very interested in, and I look forward to reading this in more detail and to reading the full report when that's available. One comment from the Access Oceanside members that really struck me was at one point was that improving bicycle routes and transit improves it for accessibility as well, because they need to get the bicycles off the sidewalk.
Yeah.
So, and we see that everywhere. So I do hope that where there are plans for improving sidewalks, improving for pedestrians, that there will be a plan to include space for cyclists that are not on top of the sidewalk. So, I mean, we see it everywhere. It's terrible. Just another point that I would like to make, or a question rather, is in the recommendations, are there also any recommendations about adjusting traffic speeds or speed limits for different types of roads? And there again, I am thinking about routes that may be cycle routes, maybe not cycle paths, but routes. I'm thinking about pedestrian routes. I'm also thinking about school routes for children. And so I wonder, it's certainly something that I'm aware of in a number of other communities. I'm thinking Saanich has recently made some changes with road speeds. I know I see that in Victoria, in Vancouver, along bike routes that might be adjacent to busier routes. So I'm just wondering, will I see that anywhere in this report?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And there's definitely been a shift towards that. I know in the UK, there's a movement of 20's plenty, which works because it's in miles per hour. It doesn't quite translate into 30. There's not a rhyme for that. So what we've done in the master plan process is that street hierarchy idea of and adding things like active and local collectors. And what that does is gives staff latitude to make changes like that, and at the discretion of warrant analysis for traffic calming and things like that. A lower posted speed can always be implemented if it's deemed necessary. We haven't gone through as part of this process and said these streets will now be this speed and those streets will be that speed. I think that's slightly outside the purview of a transportation master plan to direct where those changes will happen in that way. It's more about providing the overarching policy to say what is the goal in different areas and different types of street. And so, Parksville has a standard 50K on all streets unless otherwise posted. And so as and when maybe a local area plan or a community gets together and says, we think it's appropriate to lower street speeds, or there's a warrant on a safety analysis, maybe there's a near miss and things like that, that's when you would then move that process forward and say, well, this is eligible for a speed reduction. The more broad approach like Saanich, where it's just as a blanket, we're going to now reduce all speeds on all local streets as standard across the entire municipality. That's a much bigger endeavor. And it might be through the recommended planning project of doing the downtown circulation study that downtown streets now adopt a speed limit of X. That could be an outcome of that process for sure.
Yeah, thank you. And that was a good point that Councillor Beal brought up, because that comes up an awful lot with us anyways. Slow down the traffic, Why is it so? So I think what I'm hearing is that instead of a blanket approach like Saanich has done, which could probably take a few years to actually implement and actually happen, go site specific, and we identify, or we hear from the public as I hear constantly about Resort Drive. Preferred drive is at 50 clicks type of thing. It's bikes and tours and everything all there type of thing. So how can that actually be 50? So that would be something that instead of waiting for, a consultant such as yourself, that we could just address that with our own staff. Is that also, could that not be done? Or do we have to say this is recommended by McElhanney because they're way smarter than us? No, of course not. So we can work with our own staff on that because that's, and do it on a site specific area. And that way I think we're going to get action on that a lot quicker than, well, we got to do a consultation process and So I really like that idea, Mary, Councillor Beal. I really like that idea anyway. So we look at that basis because it's a frequent complaint we have from our citizens.
If I could just add as well, the corridors where cycling infrastructure is being recommended, as you implement those, that would be an excellent opportunity to review that corridor's speed. Because now you're potentially you're changing the curb to curb width. It's an opportunity to reduce lane widths, things like that. There's nothing worse than having a road that's designed for 60 and calling it 30, but changing nothing about the geometry,
right?
Because it feels like you're driving through molasses. It's not, and it just makes everybody anxious. So if you're putting in new infrastructure like a new sidewalk or an MUP or a bike lane, things like that give the opportunity to, okay, well, we can change the paint. We can go from 4.5 meter wide lanes to maybe 3.5. And that actually makes you feel like you should be driving a little bit slower. And it makes it easier to then adhere to a new speed limit that's a bit lower as well. So those are the great opportunities to do all those things at the same time.
Some council, any other further questions? Go ahead, Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. Could you speak a little bit more about the trends you see? You already mentioned maybe in Britain or in Saanich or in the city of Vancouver, but it seems like I've heard quite a bit on the news that there is this trend where you have pedestrians or bikes, that there is a lowering of speed limits, say from 50 to 30. And you're in the business. So I was just kind of wondering if I could pick your brain and you could tell us a little bit more about that trend and, how prevalent it might be. Thanks.
Yeah, for sure. Everyone's dealing with it slightly differently. Saanich has gone down a route of sort of bike lanes everywhere. If you look at their active transportation map, it's just blue lines on almost all roads. It's a very ambitious plan. But when you do that, you sort of allow yourself this opportunity to reduce speeds because you're treating the roadways differently. In other areas, say Coquitlam, I know put out some guidance on their cycling infrastructure. And they have a laundry list of different ways that cycling infrastructure can be delivered. And it's all based around what the comfort levels of the users are likely to be. And they've gone almost too far into the minutiae of trying to think about every possible permutation of how it could be. And I find that to be a little bit unhelpful. I think the councillor's comment about school zones and routes like that, sensitive areas, that's probably the most sensible approach to when you roll out these sorts of things, because it's such an easy win to justify in the community. You can say, well, we have all these, kids walking to school, they're crossing this roadway, they're going down this street. This should be a slower speed. And, that then lends itself to infrastructure improvements at narrow roads and slower speeds. But it comes on a case-by-case basis. And there also has to be this acknowledgement that the way that Parksville is developed and the historic nature of it and the mode share of how people move around Parksville is still predominantly by private vehicle. And that is a reality, and it will be for quite some time. Yeah. The idea of enforcing a shift away from that or slowing down all vehicles in all cases, it probably wouldn't have the desired results. Whereas doing it in the sort of the Copenhagen model, which was they had a sneaky master plan they didn't tell people about for like 50 years, and they just very incrementally built out this city that you'd never believe was any other way, right? It's a pedestrian and cyclist wonderland. This is fantastic. How can they do this? Well, they did it very, very slowly from a very auto-centric 1970s city into what they have today. And it was corridor by corridor, school by school, hospital by hospital. Right, and that's how they built that out. And I could see Parksville doing something similar, starting with the downtown, starting with key school zones, maybe with resort areas, and that's how you probably most sensibly build that out. Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I just a comment. I had a couple of contradictory terms to me, when you're in your starting your presentation was, on how to not that there's any engineers in the room, but, coordinate the traffic lights for better traffic flow, so that the bing, 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 so you can just go all the way through Parksville and not even stop and get a coffee or whatever. So, and then then we talked about temporary solutions to slow the traffic down by maybe temporary bollards or planters and that type of thing to maybe slow the traffic down through the downtown core. But if all the other lights are all coordinated, then all of a sudden everybody's got their speed up and then there's a bang, we're already got a traffic slowdown. So it could be, working against the other. My other comment is that you're talking about up at the other end of town of Temple, Roscoe, that intersection where it already cycles down 3 lanes into 2, and opening that up and paving it. I know for traffic movement, that would be a perfect situation. But to me, that's already a traffic slowing or calming. I guess that's a better word we do, so we don't. Traffic calming is already happening there. And that's people actually that are leaving town and so forth. So we have to keep in mind that maybe we already have a traffic calming built in, and if we're going to take like traffic calming out, we're going to speed the traffic up again. So just a comment. The other thing that I do like is the rapid flashing beacons. And in the past, we've tried to improve pedestrian crosswalking in other areas, and we always got this cut happen because there's no power. There's no power to do it. And now with the solar powered ones, we can basically take the RFPs and put them anywhere, which I love, and they super get your attention, and they're so good at traffic calming and pedestrian safety, in which we haven't. My only point was on where the RFPs are going to go type of thing. We've identified a few areas type of thing. Hopefully we'll be able to identify others where we know are accident prone areas type of thing. And we don't have to wait for the power anymore. As long as we haven't killed the sun. Okay, that's great. I really appreciate that. Councillor Grant, did you have your hand up at the end or not? Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Gore.
Thank you. So council was getting a lot of emails and phone calls from people about the Jensen Greenway. And you probably were also heard from the members that there was a proposal to extend the Jensen Road all the way to McVickers and take out the Greenway, which the neighbors and everybody love, riding their bikes, walking their pets and everything. So I haven't read the whole document. Is it one of the recommendations to extend Jensen Road all the way to McVickers?
It's not one of the recommendations. So just to provide a bit more information on that. So we were exploring that as a way to unlock potential lane reduction on the Island Highway. So providing additional east-west capacity was the goal there. And so the idea of that potentially being a roadway extension was something that was put out in initial engagement and subsequent engagement. And then something happened and people kind of twigged into it and realized what that meant. And then there was a perception that what we were saying was like, we are going to do this. And that's very hard to undo, that perception. And all we were ever doing was sort of protecting what is a city right of way. It is a city corridor for the potential to put a roadway there. And it was always caveated with, if we did, it would also come with all of the active mobility amenities to provide a commensurate level of service, all of this good stuff. But obviously the community gardens are there and they're much beloved as well. And so where we've landed is it's still part of the street hierarchy. It has a categorization as a roadway. And so it's still part of the city's road network. It's being used as a greenway. It will continue to be used as a greenway. And there was nothing in the traffic analysis that indicated that there was any need for it to alleviate traffic congestion or provide additional connectivity or anything like that. Nor was there any particular push from emergency services when we had the discussion with them that they needed this additional thing. So this is nothing that is imminent or proposed or planned for or anything like that. And so better to not have it in the document as a discussion point. Tucked away in an appendix, the conversation around it, we talk about that was part of the engagement. We heard the feedback, we've responded accordingly. And hopefully that's one of the things that when residents read the transportation master plan, they can say, oh yeah, they listened, they understood what we were trying to tell them. So hopefully that's a positive thing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that because I don't think I could support converting our greenway into a roadway. My next question to you is about the Wembley Mall area. I guess that was not part of this master plan.
Well, I mean, the areas in the city in that area are part of the transportation master plan. I know there were a lot of challenges around that area, and they were raised in the public engagements around Church and the Wembley Mall and things like that. And there's parts of the private roadway that are used as essentially part of the public road network and things like that. There's nothing in the recommendations to say that the city should expropriate that roadway and part of the city's network or anything like that. And so any of the elements of the transportation master plan that hit on that area aren't specific to Wembley Mall itself or anything around that property, I would say.
Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Just to clarify, because I was looking at some of the recommendations and I could not find any recommendations from that area for any improvements for either cycling network or like pedestrian safety. That does come up quite a bit when council hears from public on those issues.
I think there is some pedestrian infrastructure improvement in that general area, the sort of north of the city. And it was something that we took to heart, that we realized that after the initial round of engagement, we've been quite downtown focused, and recognizing that Parksville is quite an unusual geography, Parksville is, and municipal boundaries. It does stretch out quite a ways, and we tried to make sure that we weren't ignoring parts of the city that maybe don't get the spotlight on them as frequently. But that area, again, coming back to this idea of what can you feasibly, realistically, pragmatically achieve and is needed, that wasn't an area that anything sort of immediately apparent sprung to mind, other than the connectivity via the Hearst cycling infrastructure that connects up to the multi-use pathway that connects up to Church. Which I think through the developments that are happening within the regional district, which is on the sort of other side of the line, there's some good opportunities for making that active mobility connectivity all the way from out near the Wembley Mall, all the way to downtown on a dedicated facility, which would be a really great asset for the city. I think it's about 8 or 9 kilometers.
Right. And quite the public perception of where the boundary is and so forth, like around Wembley Mall is very skewed, and understandably it is very confusing. It is not a straight line, and it's very confusing that why doesn't Parksville fix what's happening on the Church Road and all the rest of it, where we know that there are, but that is outside our purview. So we really just have to educate the public to say, yes, it's a mess, and that is it's an electoral area mess, and MOTI and so forth, that they have to work together to make that happen. But all that we can do is control what we can control. And and part of that is getting that message to the public that this in fact is not City of Parksville. And so we hear you, but in fact you're talking to the wrong council at this particular point. But yeah, go ahead, Councilor Bill. Go ahead. Sure. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm imagine that you've had some good conversations with our engineering department. And I'm wondering if in this document at this time or in communication with them, has there been some look at costing these various items? Okay.
Yeah, so we've undertaken cost estimation for I think all the recommendations, at least in principle. Given the way the world is right now and what the cost of materials and where they come from, that becomes a little bit of crystal ball gazing. But at the time when we did the cost estimation based on precedent examples from recent construction projects on the island, I think is where the pool is drawn from to understand what a per kilometer cost of sidewalk or cycling infrastructure is. And some of the other items that we did conduct the cost estimation. It will be included in the transportation master plan as well.
Another question? Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Any other questions? I think we've got it covered. You come in under time, so good job. Yeah, I really appreciate it. Yeah, thank you so much for all your work. And yeah, the biggest point is that you listened, and that's what we have to do more of. And this is very important that you listened well, and you lots of opportunities for the public. And the public have come back to us and said they loved it. And so forth, even people that didn't live in Park. So, you know, we just said, what, you were there? But we really appreciate that, hearing all the public's, and it's looking good. Looking forward to, you know, being able to see it online. And so that we can really get into our homework. We got a big project ahead, council, when this gets online here, because you're going to be able to go through it properly and work with our fine engineering staff that may or may not be in the room. That's why they're so fine. Thanks, Matt. I appreciate that.
Councillors, thank you very much.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. Any questions from anybody in the audience for Matt while he's here? Go ahead.
Part of the downtown parking and highway 98. In your recommendations, there were studies should be done. I'm wondering if there's some prioritization or timeline for fitting those studies into where you might see some of those studies. What you would recommend, I know it's not your decision, but what you would recommend.
Am I addressing that this way, or can I speak this way?
You may face the audience on this one. Go ahead. The microphone will carry.
So short term is the quick answer. So those are plans that when funds for planning projects are available, that is the planning project that you should do.
And is there a prioritization? What should be done for the other?
My professional preference would be that they're done at the same time. So downtown circulation parking are the same thing. And they should be handled as the same thing, because if you change one, you have an impact on the other, and doing them separately seems like probably a waste of resources to me. So I think doing them as a combined planning project gets you more efficient benefits. So that would be the recommendation.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Okay, Tracy, you asked nicely. Go ahead.
In those three potential studies, with all of them, one of them look at the sidewalks that are downtown in terms of parking and traffic flow, just as a for instance. I can go on and on, so I'm trying to make this as short as I can. Just because there's a parking spot doesn't mean it's really accessible. I'm sure you heard that from access side. Just because there's a parking lot 2 blocks away does not mean people will park there. If there's a parking 3 blocks away, they may not park there. So how do we make the sidewalks more comfortable, more safe for people? I guess that's my question. And is there any consideration in those 3 plans that could be?
So the circulation components of it probably won't consider that, except considering whether crosswalks, because that impacts the flow of traffic and things like that. The parking one would primarily be focused on identifying usage, utilization. So you have maybe 8 parking spots on a frontage. Are they full all day? Are they full of the same 8 cars all day? Is it 100 cars rotating through 8 spaces? What does that look like? And what that will help you understand is what the demand is in different areas of the city and when. That's what that tries to tease out. And if what you find is, well, we have this accessible parking location, it's utilized heavily by lots of people all day, then that's probably one where the infrastructure around it, the sidewalks or the signage, should be invested in. If you have another accessible parking spot, for example, in another part of the city where nobody ever seems to use this spot, it's been used once in the 3 survey days that we looked at, then maybe that's a lower priority in terms of improving its use. Or maybe they're not using it because it's got terrible infrastructure. So those are the kinds of insights that you would hope to get out of that study. That's the goal. Yeah.
Thanks. And Teresa, thanks for the question. So I was going to comment, back, you're suggesting how to make the sidewalk safer and so forth, so that the people aren't afraid to walk maybe 2 blocks, to get it. But part of that is also raises the question. We want to get the people walking through the downtown core, but at the same time, when we receive complaints, as you know, from the multitude of signboards that are on the sidewalks. And I think it's probably a bylaw that says we're not supposed to do that. It's probably not enforced. And due to the fact that we recognize the value of signboards for advertising for the businesses. But the reality is people with accessibility issues and so forth really don't like those signboards because they do provide tripping hazards as well. And I recognize that too, not that anybody would walk down the street, by looking at this. But there's a good chance they shouldn't do it downtown because there's going to be a signboard on it. So part of the way of increasing that safe accessibility would be to have the signboards off the sidewalk. I'm just saying, and that's an obvious thing that was brought up to me, especially as I say, distracted walking. It's a big deal. And if there's a signboard there type of thing, so we do our best to, take care of where the roots are uplifting the concrete, so forth, as ongoing trees and sidewalks problem. But there are other hazards there, and signboards are one of them. So I'm just throwing that out there. Right, I believe CAO Kaler, is there not an existing bylaw already prohibiting signboards or sandwich boards on the public sidewalks? Is there or not?
Yes, I believe the sign bylaw allows sandwich boards on the private property, but they shouldn't be on the public property.
Yeah, as I understand it, it was on the public sidewalks, and there are a lot of yes, there is. Well, anyways, there are some, but we should be, consistent, right? If it's not very many or some, then we should be consistent in enforcing our bylaw. Say, well, it's not just good for some. What the bylaw is good for everyone. So, but I'm very willing if you'd like to come in and have a conversation with that in mind. I have a lovely assistant that would be very happy to set up that meeting. Call anytime. Thank you. Thank you. Is that everybody? I'm going to let Matt get off the hot seat here. And thank you for your time, Matt. I really appreciate that. And yeah, we're looking forward to seeing the full-on presentation. Thank you, sir. Okay, council, speaking of engineering, we have a staff presentation by Ayla DeFleur, anyways, regarding a update on engineering infrastructure projects. Ayla DeFleur, Manager of Engineering, welcome to the podium, almost a podium. Have a seat.
Thank you very much. You can see.
And
we're getting
Jetta's here
another chair
too.
here for Jetta.
Wow, it's a great day. We have
tag teamed
we have Jetta Holmes and we have Ayla DeFleur doing the presentation. Council, welcome.
Thank
Do you
you.
know how to work the microphone?
Yes. I think so.
Okay. Jetta knows how. Thanks, Ayla. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to say again, thank you very much to Matthew Browning. That was a great presentation and you put it together pretty quickly. So that's much appreciated. And I also wanted to say thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity to share what we're planning and what we're working on in engineering. I'd like to update you on our recent projects, past, present, and future, and talk about some of the funding sources. And I'll also highlight the projects that are supported and informed by the Transportation Master Plan. Sorry, you're not hearing it well enough. There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you. So in 2023, we saw the construction of the Moss Avenue Renewal Project, and we started the 4 new master planning documents that we are working on. In 2024, we saw the completion of the water and sanitary sewer master plans and ongoing work for the Transportation Master Plan and Storm Drainage Master Plan. And in 2024, we also supported other projects at the city, like the salt shed replacement, the water treatment plant pretreatment RFP, the water planning study, and the chemical room safety audit and tank replacement. In 2024, we supported the planning department on more than 50 development files, and we continue to do so. They kind of add up day by day, as you know. And as Matt mentioned, in 2024, we were able to install some RRFBs at this crosswalk on Jensen Ave at McMillan, Ave West at McMillan Street South. And we secured $3,500 in grant funding from ICBC's Road Improvement Program. And just a little background on that grant funding, it was founded in 1990, and this program has funded approximately $225 million in over 8,300 road safety improvement projects. And the projects are anything from crosswalks, RFBs, roundabouts, bike lanes, sidewalks, lighting. These are all considered, anything that makes the road safer is considered for that grant funding. So that's something that we have on our radar for all of the projects that we're working on. The next 3 slides I'm going to show you are some of the projects that engineering will be working on in 2025 and 2026. Funding for all of these projects is already included in the provisional 2025 to 2029 financial plan, either specifically or within the sustainable infrastructure funding envelope. This update today is just to share with you what specific projects we're leading and supporting in engineering. You'll see on this list, Alberni Highway, Jensen Ave West, and Stanford Ave are some projects that we're looking at. I will talk more about those on some slides further down. So as you can see, we have the Alberni sidewalk, active transportation improvements. That will be from Stanford Ave to Lee. Weld Street sidewalk renewal, a 10-year capital plan, like a master plan synthesis. The transportation master plan, of course, we're going to wrap that up. The stormwater master plan also going to be completed this year. The Parksville Pathway project, we're in design on that to be built next year. The Jensen Ave utility and road renewal with sidewalk addition, that's in design this year. And then Stanford Ave utility and road renewal with the sidewalk gap infills. There was a few gaps on the sidewalk on Stanford, as you've heard, I'm sure. And the asterisks, as you see next to some of those projects there, those are projects that are supported and informed by the 2025 Transportation Master Plan. So those are the capital, minor capital, and planning projects that are currently on our list.
I'm going to ask you.
Sure.
Ayla, if you could allow questions like Ayla, while we're here. I
Sure.
think it's appropriate to ask questions as we go. If there's any of the projects that council's unsure of what they're actually containing, let's ask them right now.
Absolutely.
Go ahead. I just read your mind.
Thank you. Like that was my question to our consultant on the master plan about the first one. It's very important, as you know, for our community safety. My only question is, from my recollection, this was brought forward, I think, our first year in as council. And I think at that time, what was mentioned was there's some major upgrades to the utilities that need to happen on that stretch. That's why it was being delayed. So is that part of these improvements to do those upgrades to the utilities as well?
If I may, through the mayor to Councillor Gore. My understanding is that there will be some utility improvements, like we'll look at lighting, that under the actual paved surface of Alberni, there isn't too much to upgrade for utilities. So we can kind of, I was going to point out also, this project is separate from the paving that we are doing in April here. So we're able to do that kind of discreetly without affecting a lot of the underground utilities. Does that answer your question? Oh yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you. I do want to take this opportunity to thank our engineering department. I'm so happy to see all this huge list. And I would have been happier had this been done by now, but I understand you guys are really busy and the community will really appreciate these improvements. They are very important for their quality of life and just safety as well. So thank you again to you, Sean, and everybody on your team. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's that comment of, I really like those numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that because it's usually that's 5 years away. A lot of good for us. So, I really appreciate that. It's all current projects. So, yeah, very appreciative of that. Thank you, Ayla.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Councillor Beal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through to our Director of Finance. So if I understood correctly, first of all, yeah, I'm thrilled to see this list. I can see that Wells Street renewal, that's already started with the removal of those trees, and it is that section. But so my question is that, did I hear correctly that this is all factored into the financial plan at present?
Yeah, thank you for your question. As Ayla commented, these are basically the specifics of the larger lump sum amounts that you see on the capital plan, and in some cases, the minor capital plan. So it's really bringing back to council as part of the amended financial plan, some of the details of those amounts. As you know, the last few years, we've been working on bits and pieces of all of these things with the master plans, the asset management plans. So this is really where engineering takes it off from here and builds that out by synthesizing those plans. But I have a short presentation on kind of how the funding is in place to support these projects. So Ayla is here to provide some of the details, and then we'll do a little bit of a review of how that financing kind of is in place already.
Lovely. Thank you. Go ahead, Mary.
Thank you. And without getting into too much detail, I am curious, the plan for Alberni Highway sidewalk and active transportation, that includes like filling in the ditch, that deep ditch along the side and so on. And yes, I was just kind of curious. That looks like it would be a lot of concrete going into this. It sounds expensive.
Thank you for your question. I think that the details of how it's going to work on the right of way will be determined once we have the survey done and start doing the design work. But there is a lot of room there. The right of way is very wide, so we do have a lot to work with, and I don't think we really want to go further off the paved road if we don't have to. So there's also a lot of space there right now. The lanes for vehicles, we're just going to adjust those when we do the paving because we're going to be repainting anyway. The lanes will be brought down to a normal roadway lane width, and that's going to leave an odd amount of space. So I think once you see that, you're going to see, oh, there's a perfect space right there for some pedestrian infrastructure. Yeah.
Yes, and I'm pretty excited about Stanford as well.
Yes.
Stanford is
Yes.
start, stop. It's a bit of a mess. Yeah, so I really like that. Yes, yeah, so that's great. Any other comments at this time? Okay, go ahead, Ayla. Okay.
So some more projects. These are our ongoing year-over-year projects. We are implementing a pavement overlay program based on our pavement condition assessment that we did. So the first one will be mostly done this month. Get ready for some paving to be done on Temple Street near Field Street, Field Crescent, Stanhope Road near Pym Street North. Those will be first, and then we'll go to Alberni Highway from Despard to Jensen, and that's just overlay work. So we're scraping off the top layer and putting down new pavement, and that helps keep the longevity of the road. We also are implementing the CCTV utility inspection program. That's in its third year. We've done quite a lot of the city already of the gravity mains for condition assessment, and that helps us plan out when they need to be renewed more accurately than just based on age alone. We have also the RRFB installations, as Matthew mentioned, that was something that came out of the transportation master plan. So that's on our radar now to just do year by year as the warrants allow and indicate, and budgets allow, of course. New crosswalk installations. We have identified a location for a crosswalk on Alberni Highway at Bernard and Dunbar Way. So that is going to be part of the Alberni crosswalk or sidewalk project, sorry. So they'll be all done at once. And then also a crosswalk on Hearst at Lodgepole is on our books. We also are working with RDN Transit to work on bus stop improvements. So that's something we'll be doing year over year as well.
And if I can just, I see the RFPs my favorite.
Yeah.
Would they possibly qualify for support from ICBC, depending on the location?
It's a good question. Yes, they're one of the most, it's a kind of a, I'm not going to say like it's a sure thing or anything, of course, but they're quite willing to entertain RFB installations as a road improvement for funding.
Love it. Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Gore.
Hi,
Hi.
for the bus stop improvements,
Mhm.
the council has approved previously, I think, monies towards the bus shelter installations. Is that part of the improvements?
That's right.
And how many are we, not that I want to overload you folks, but how many are we planning like every year, sort of improvements in that aspect?
Sure. So it depends on what improvements we're talking about. You know that they've adopted a transit redevelopment strategy. And with that, they're going to be adjusting some routes within Parksville in 2026. They say 2026 so far, may change. At that point, we would need to look at planting a whole bunch of bus stop signposts. So I'm cognizant that budget that we have per year, I want to make sure that we're ready for that redevelopment that they're doing. And so I'm just going to be working with the RDN Transit to plan that out and get ahead of that. And then with the money we have left over, we could do kind of the highest use bus stops and make improvements as we can with the budget that we have.
Great, thank you. Okay, thanks, Ellen. Carry on.
Okay, thank you. This is a list of projects that engineering is helping operations with. There are just a few odd projects that I wanted to highlight, like the operations yard wash pad. That's been on our radar and we're in design on that one. The Seaway Drive drainage issue, some solution to that. The Wrens Road groundwater issue, you may have noticed the bump on Wrens. We're looking at that, solutions to that. And there's a water meter chamber replacement that's been highlighted by operations as well. Any questions on those?
Yeah, number two is excellent news because I just had a meeting with an individual asking if they should be putting a curb along there. And I actually find the green sandbags quite attractive. But perhaps something better could be worked out for there. And he was just wondering about that.
Right.
So, and it's interesting because it's coming up because he's actually taking out a building permit application as well at the same time. So he just thought, should I put a curb in here at the same time? Because he's going to redo his driveway. So that's excellent timing on that. Anyways, you're looking at it, and not that it's rained much this winter, but we actually had a swimming pool on Seaway Drive for much of the winter. So I don't know why we went to referendum. We could have just used Seaway Drive swimming pool. Anyways, sorry.
Any other questions on these projects? I'll go on to some specifics for Alberni, Jensen, and Stanford now, if that's okay. So just some details here. I think we've talked about a lot of this already, but it is independent of the scheduled paving overlay that's going to be happening this month, weather dependent. It's in the design phase for 2025 and with construction set for this year. We hope to get it done this year. Just depending on weather and other extenuating circumstances, maybe it would go into 2026, but the goal is to start this year. Considered for ICBC grant funding, I'm working with the representative at ICBC on this project, and the amount is yet to be determined. Once we can provide her a scope, she'll be able to identify that amount. This supports tourism by linking the Alberni Gateway neighborhood to downtown Parksville, as you mentioned. And lighting considerations and other active transportation modes will be included as well.
Councillor Wood, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chair. Can elected people help with the ICBC grant funding? You talking with other elected people, or is it just kind of a staff thing and you guys are comfortable with that?
I have no idea. I don't know.
Okay. Well, we're here if you need
Thank you.
us.
Thank you.
Councillor Beal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just to be totally clear on the active transportation nod there, this is sidewalk, but there will also be a painted line so that there's an area. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah,
And
that's
is
right.
there- Yeah, okay. And are there other grant opportunities that are worth exploring? I mean, I realize that grants also take a lot of staff time to pursue, but I'm aware of, at the federal level, although perhaps we have to wait till the election's over, that there have been funds for active transportation, green municipality funds, et cetera.
Yes, certainly. I will speak a little bit more about this later, but we have already applied for the federal active transportation grant for the Parksville Pathway project. And ICBC grant funding is something that we just do automatically. We always keep an eye out for grant funding, especially the provincial grant funding for active transportation comes out in usually the fall. So we'll be hopefully ready with some designs by that point. It really helps us to have kind of tender ready drawings when we're applying for these grants. It's hard to apply for a grant if you don't know what you're applying for. So it really, really helps us if we have these designs in our pockets, and that's the goal. Yeah. So Jensen Avenue West, renewal, road reconstruction and sidewalk addition. So this is utility driven, active transportation driven, and it would be from Molliet to McMillan. It's also on the list for the ICBC grant funding. It's something that's been brought forward to them. And we're looking to enter the design phase in 2025.
Go ahead, Councilor Gore.
Yes, thank you. Just to clarify, this will have sidewalks on both sides, or are you just looking at one?
We were just looking at one side. It's
Okay.
not set in stone, but that seems more appropriate for this level of roadway.
Yeah, just because I happen to live in the neighborhood, I know it's not like foot traffic is not that heavy on this side, but definitely adding one side would be appropriate in terms of costs and everything too. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
You want to be on your side? I will right down the middle.
And our favorite, Stanford Avenue East, utility replacement and road reconstruction, McCarter to Shelley. This is a significant length of roadway, so this project would be likely over years, depending on budget. So we would be working within the budgets available and doing modular amounts as appropriate. And again, ICBC grant funding is a possibility. We are looking at this as an opportunity to look at linear rain gardens along the south side to help with runoff treatment and aquifer recharge. This would be a comprehensive renewal of utilities and the road pavement structure with some sidewalk gap infill as well to make it a continuous sidewalk from McCarter to Shelley. And similarly to what Matthew was mentioning in the Transportation Master Plan presentation, this has been identified by the public as like an alternate east-west route for cyclists and active transportation modes, removing them kind of from the highway melee onto Stanford. So that's something that we're cognizant of when we're looking at this design.
If I may, Ayla, just on this particular stretch, if consideration could be made to improve parking on there, because we have a kind of a busy pub in the area there and craft brewery, and we have received numerous complaints from some other areas for illegal parking and so forth. So whether it's bump outs or whatever it is, just as I'm sure you're aware of this already, but I see this area of Stanford becoming more that way. There's pending projects just further on down, large housing projects that are pending as well. So I think it's good that we do it right. And, like with there's just a sidewalk on one side, will be totally up to you. But at the same time, just don't forget maybe some parking improvements would be definitely welcome.
Agreed. Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah.
Councilor Beal, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm just wondering if as well, as you said, this is going to be a multi-year project, but when it is completed, and as the mayor said, anticipating even further increase in traffic, and already people use it to skirt around, if they're coming down Alberni, they're off to Despard and then on to Stamford and on, or the other way around. So with that, is there already thoughts that there would be a pedestrian controlled crosswalk, perhaps at some place along there, maybe at the top of McVickers, or anyway, that's all in due time. But I imagine that would be looked at once it's completed as well. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for your question. Yeah, you're right. Like it would be looked at in design. That would certainly be a consideration. Anytime we're looking at building a sidewalk on one side, which I believe that's the direction we're going, because the south side is like not a lot of people are wanting to cross at these areas. So we were looking at mostly sidewalk on one side for the road. So we want to make it so that people can access that infrastructure, which involves crossing the street, and that would be a consideration that we would look at. And then as far as traffic calming, like if we're having a lot of users using the same road, we would want to make sure we handle that as well as we can, in terms of making sure everybody has a place there and that speeds are in the appropriate range. Mhm.
No plans for a sheep crossing at the end? None at
Not
this
so
time?
far, no.
Okay,
We'll see what comes out of the engagement.
so much for our rack of lamb. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So I just wanted to point out the funding. We have 7 million for capital renewals are currently available and requiring no additional taxation. Engineering projects are implemented by kind of saving up reserves until the cost of construction can be covered. So we do what we can with the budget that we have to avoid the additional taxation. We feel that it's important to keep the reserves building so that we can do the larger projects like Stanford Avenue, because it's just going to be quite large and we can't break it up too much without being quite disruptive to the public and the people who are using that road on a daily basis. The engineering department is expecting to be fully staffed as of June 2025, creating the capacity to deliver. I'm very excited about it. Since I've been here in 2019, it hasn't been the case. So I'm very happy to say we have an amazing team forming, and I've really appreciated the leadership and guidance from Sean, and HR has been helping a lot. So very excited about that. And the grants that we've already applied for, I did mention this, we've already applied for a couple of the grants. And at this very preliminary stage, this is what we could appropriately apply for. And once we have more of those designs in hand and scopes defined, then we'll be able to apply for other grants, and we'll always keep an eye out for those. And I think that's all of my slides. So thank you all very much for the opportunity to speak today about the projects that we're working on and that we're excited about. And if there are no further questions, I'll hand it over to Jetta.
Before we disappear, any questions from the audience?
Yes.
No, I think it's great.
Thanks, Tammy. Thank you. Oh, Councilor Martin, go ahead.
Been very silent at all this, but this is wonderful news, and thank you for the care that you've taken. The Shelley Road connection there is a big deal, and I know what you're saying is it's going to take a lot of disruption and funds, but in the long run, it's going to be worth it when it's done. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Grens.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. I know the urban forest strategy is forthcoming. I wonder if there's any opportunity being contemplated to use trees as a way to do traffic calming in an infrastructure way. Yeah.
Thank you for your question. I do work with Graham Giddon regularly on streets, and when we're talking about any kind of urban planting, he's definitely a resource that I lean on. And I think that I'm glad that you mentioned it, because it's an underutilized, or people don't necessarily know about trees and all of the amazing things they do for us, including traffic calming. So that's something on my radar, and that's certainly something that we're interested in exploring.
Well, you certainly proved yourself at Hearst. across from the Legion there.
Yeah.
The advantages of trees and the bump outs and so forth, and it's beautiful. It really is, especially this time of year, of course, but it's beautiful anytime. But yeah, and you really use those trees to find form. So thank you for that.
Thank you very
Any
much.
other questions? Okay, let's pick it up from Jetta Holmes. Go ahead, Jetta.
We'll just keep Ayla here in case there's any questions that come up during our discussion of the dollars here. What I wanted to kind of just review with council is to understand or to make sure that you understand how that sustainable capital funding envelope works and how it looks in our financial plan. And essentially what happens is that amount that is essentially contributed to reserve is that $4 million amount that council approved in 2022 and we started in 2023. And that's spread over general water and sewer to provide for infrastructure replacement and all of these projects that Ayla's been discussing today. So in a very simplistic fashion, it goes into the reserve and essentially sits there until it's needed or identified by engineering as projects that come together that are all assessed as high priority, or there's other reasons that are identified in the master plans that make it the year that's appropriate for those funds to be spent. So then what you'll see in that year is you'll see it in the capital expenditures line in the top, and then you'll see the equivalent transfer from reserves come in at that point. So we used to budget where we had all of the projects listed and there was the number in the financial plan, and it wasn't really representative, as Ayla's demonstrated today, how these projects often are kind of a 3-year timeframe, right? They get designed, then 1 year they get constructed, and they maybe even get finished up in the 3rd year, or maybe a large project like Stanford might be even extended any further. So it helps to have the money in the reserve, and then it can be applied as needed as that project kind of organically rolls out, or if the timelines change or the weather doesn't cooperate, that we're not dealing with the ups and the downs of taxing for that. So that's really the beauty of having kind of a consistent funding formula for our infrastructure like that. And certainly council's decision as part of the 25 to 29 financial plan to index that 4 million to inflation means that the amount of work that can be done by that consistent funding essentially stays the same over time. Had we just considered at a hard 4 million over time, with inflation, we'd be getting less and less of a project as we went out. So I guess there's a couple things to consider here. This is just illustrating in the general fund. It's the same in the water and the sewer, but we've kind of worked with this $4 million number for a number of years now, and most of that is left in reserves, as Ayla said, because the most significant project over the last couple has been Moss, but there's been a lot of work going on in the behind the scenes on design and getting these projects ready, which also facilitates our ability to apply for grants as they become available, which we often don't have a whole lot of advance notice of. It's like, okay, here it is, let's go. What have you got ready to go on that? So it's helpful to invest some of this infrastructure funding into the design piece, so we have that ready to apply. But what we know with each master plan we get is that the dollars required to replace our infrastructure is much higher than that 4 million. And so part of our work plan, as you know, this year is to bring council back some funding alternatives on that. I have a couple of scenarios that are both very simple to show you, but it helps to illustrate a couple of different points on this. The first is just to show, say, over a 20-year time frame, if we continue to invest our 4 million, but we supplement it with some grant funding, we end up leaving more in the reserve to build over time and accumulate interest. And we know that in the very long run, we will have 50-year replacements and 80-year replacements of linear infrastructure especially. So in this assumption, let's say we took the gas tax funding every year and put that in and use that funding to essentially reduce the amount of our own funding we have to use. So we still continue to put the same amount into reserve, but we only pull out less of it because some of it is grant funded. as compared to just using our own funding without any grants. And so as Ayla indicated, whenever there's a grant opportunity, small or large, we try and get in on that and see if we can't supplement that. We have some regular funding like gas tax. We also have things like Growing Communities Fund. All of these are typically capital oriented, so this is the place we can use them. What this graph shows is that if we used, in this example, the gas tax every year, that orange line is the line of our reserves growing over time. The blue is if we didn't supplement it with grant funding. And as you can see, just with compound interest and the passage of time, that difference in our bank account can grow quite significantly to help fund the longer term infrastructure replacement. So there'll be examples like this that will bring to you to say, okay, if we assume a certain amount of grant funding in all of our infrastructure, it means we can either contribute less or we can provide more for the future.
And Councillor Dwyer.
Yeah, just a quick comment. Yeah. Thank you. I like what you're saying, but there's a caveat that the grant funding is so unpredictable too, right? So we can't really, it makes sense that if we have a consistent and reliable grants, the graph will go up, but that's not the case with grants, correct?
Well, the gas tax is consistent.
Right.
Yes, it's renegotiated from time to time, and certainly lobby groups like UBCM or FCM are certainly always pushing for that to become a commitment. And it has been now for a dozen years or more, and we still have a number of years. So there's two kind of ideas around that. One is that is relatively predictable. So council could, at least for some amount of time, count on that. The other part of the mathematical equation is the earlier you use the grant funding and leave your own money in the bank, it allows a couple of different things. One is it allows the compound interest to work, right? And that can be almost magical in terms of how quickly it can grow. The second thing is we can work with Municipal Finance Authority and other places to say, let's park this for 10 years and our rates that we can get are significantly higher than if it's unpredictable. So there's some opportunities there that come from a commitment to use some of that extra funding. So it's just going to be some of the alternatives that we have to look at now that we're kind of on this routine and have this reserve structure in place. The second chart I'd like to show you is basically what Ayla was indicating, in that if the blue columns are the actual kind of construction project costs in any one year, you can see that over, say, a 20-year period, there's going to be some years that are quite low, and maybe those are design years that are mostly, for whatever reason, we're not doing a lot of construction, but we're doing design and getting pieces ready. But then, say, in year 12, you have like a Stanford where you've got a lot of outpouring of funds. And as Sean has shared with me, we can do $1 million worth of paving in a week. So it can go that quickly. But what we want to make sure, and as Ayla was referencing, we want to make sure that we have the reserve funds in place for year 12, so that by the time we get there, we've accumulated enough. So that means that in some of those years, we need to be doing less. So that's what this build out of at least a 10-year capital plan will start to help us prepare for that financing piece as well. And so that the financial plan can reflect growing the reserves to be in place for those years that are expected to be higher construction costs. What the green line shows is just the annual contributions. And so that's where we get that smoothing of on a similar amount every year, indexed for inflation, that doesn't have our property tax rates going up and down as construction is needed. So this is all part and parcel of that whole reserve structure and this sustainable funding envelope that allows us to plan for the infrastructure replacement. It also allows for us to respond to things that happen like sinkholes and water main breaks and things like that if there are emergency type things and we need to make other arrangements. So just a couple of simplistic illustrations, but I think help to show how the sustainable funding envelope can be very effective in the kind of long-term infrastructure replacement. Any questions on all of that? That's the end of kind of this part, and we'll
Go ahead, Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have said this before, Jetta, but I really appreciate, I've had so many constituents who are so concerned about our costs and the taxes and everything. They talk about it all the time. And then the older you are, the more they talk about it. And so I want to say that this gives me peace of mind, I mean, I've always felt that because I was here long before I was running. But it's very well done. And thank you for us not having this up and down nonsense. So thank you.
Great, thank you. I think one thing that I believe I've communicated with council on before is that I think that that annual contribution amount basically can be thought of as a proxy for the use of all of the infrastructure in the city. So everybody that's here today pays a certain amount every year towards the use of the infrastructure, and it helps to get away from the complications of generational equity and things like that, at least for the basic infrastructure. We can talk all day about the extra things, but I think for the water flowing clean and the toilet flushing and roads to drive on and storm drainage, et cetera, this at least makes sure that, you know, essentially that funding piece is that kind of proxy for the use, and that cost gets reflected in the financial plan every year.
Tammy, go ahead.
Couple things. One, Ayla was talking on your presentation, the downtown parking lot. When you find yours, right? Where is it? It's on the list of projects.
So we are looking, sorry.
Said purchasing, and then on the very first slide.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
The-
Right there.
so the-
Public parking lot.
Right. So we're looking at a public parking lot right now. We're working with a local interest group. Hold on, let's say that's right.
We're okay.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
It's at 149 Stanford Avenue East. Yeah, it's a city-owned lot.
Yeah.
And we're working with the lawn bowling club there. I'm actually meeting with them soon to discuss like a mutual use of that space there on the west side of their property.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you. And so then my next question for Jetta is on the finance piece there. I've seen it said about reserve parking fund, and I think it showed 120,000. Is that the parking fund that is for downtown, that like the money that the property that was sold here? That's not that separate?
So there's two different reserves. One is the land sale reserve fund, which is different than the off-street parking fund. So it's the off-street parking fund that could be used towards parking facilities and things like that.
Oh, okay, I'm
Yeah.
just checking, I thought that's that.
Okay. Yep.
Go ahead,
Okay.
Jenna. Thank you.
I think we're done with this part of the presentation, and the next thing would be the next thing on the agenda, which would be moving into the amended financial plan, unless council had any other questions.
Yeah, any other questions for Ayla while she's here? Okay, that's great. Thanks very much for your presentation, Ayla. Okay, well done.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
It would appear to me that the term for this council for our term that describes this would be financial reserves.
Yes.
It really is financial reserves. We're living for all the financial reserves that you're providing to provide us this smooth road. We don't like speed bumps.
Yeah.
So
Financial reserves and asset management.
yes, and
Yeah.
it's just you're actually making our jobs way easier and making a less impactful event happen on taxpayers, and I appreciate that. Yeah, well, in future, yeah, as you say, moving forward, that this is actually going for generations here. So love it. Thank you. We're going to ask for a comfort break this time. 2:38. Let's reconvene at 2:45.
Downside of drinking 2 glasses. of water.
Yeah. Good afternoon. Let us reconvene. Thank you. Jetta, carry on.
Thank you. So everything I said on Monday about the tariffs has now been on 90-day pause. So we can just park all of that and we'll just redo the financial plan. And this is why we don't spend a lot of time.
Did that
Trying
actually
to-
happen? Did that actually happen today?
Yes. Yeah, so that's the ride, right?
And just for Canada?
Everyone who hasn't retaliated is my understanding. Yeah. Yeah, okay, so here we go.
Thank you.
So just bringing forward the details of some of the amendments for the general water and sewer funds, as well as my recommendations with respect to the rates that were adopted as part of the provisional. Typically, this amended financial plan cycle would only be kind of brand new things and significant new things. As we talked about on Monday, we've really taken more of a deep dive on this one in terms of trying to provide some relief perhaps in terms of a property tax rate decrease, as well as just looking at where we might have risks related to the economic uncertainty right now. So I would suggest to you that the provisional financial plan was already quite lean. And so what senior staff have tried to do is identify things that can be deferred till next year or can be reallocated. Perhaps a different form of funding was available. Council approved the use of some of those reserves on Monday, so I'll illustrate for you today where we might use those in order to bring that property rate increase down. Amanda. Let's see. Thank you. That's just our usual recurring schedule. After today, because this is committee of the whole, any resolutions from the committee will be to council, which you'll consider at the April 23rd meeting, and then we'll go from there. So I'm going to try and get through this efficiently and provide council with information about these amendments. What I would say, and further to what I just said, is that we've looked at a lot of different areas as to where we might reduce costs or use different types of revenues. So these are some of the categories where there are changes that are included in what I'm going to show you today. So one is where we had estimates in the provisional financial plan, and now we've actually paid for those things. So we actually know what the numbers are. So where that was a reduction, we tried to move the budgets downwards to reflect what it actually cost us. So things like our insurance is paid, we know have had confirmation on some of our 1% utility revenues. We have the 2024 year end audit is complete. So we have our carry forward amounts. Some things like that. We have adjustments following the audit of the 2024 statements, things like looking at where actuals were last year to inform where they maybe ought to be in the budget in 2025, adjusting those estimates relative to what those actuals were, as well as carry forward projects. In the provisional, we're looking at those projects at the beginning of October in the budget, and still there's 3 months of operations. So we make our best guess, but the amended is really tweaking all of those up or down. And as you know, with the carry forward, the funding just carries forward. So there's no impact on the property taxes for the carry forward projects. Use of new reserves to fund capital and operating projects. So I'm going to propose today amendments with respect to using the IT reserve to fund some equipment replacement, the PCTC to reserve to fund some replacement of equipment here as well, and insurance deductibles. We've deferred some projects that we'll give you some details on, one of which was some painting. And so that means, yes, we've moved it into a subsequent year, but I think right now in a time of economic uncertainty, it's better to kind of move things out, is just about as good as avoiding them altogether. We've put some contingencies in with respect to tariffs, just to provide some flexibility in the budget in case we've got critical items that are coming in above what we have budgeted. Some maintenance contingencies funded from surplus, so not any increase in property taxes for that, as well as some contingencies around wages where we maybe have some question about what we're going to need for service delivery in the year. And then looking at some alternative funding for focus wages within capital revenue. And I'm going to propose that we fund one engineering tech position out of our capital funding envelope, because as Ayla showed today, those eng techs are doing a lot of work on the capital. And I think it makes sense to actually have our capital fund some of that design work, as well as looking at where we've got a couple of key vacancies, reallocating the surplus that's coming from those vacancies into important service areas that support the community this year. And that was some of what we talked about on Monday, where we're expecting perhaps a lot more tourism this month. So trying to have some extra bodies in the community park seasonally, on weekends, in evenings. So reallocating some of that. So again, no increase in the property tax for that, but in fact, some additional service level. So what we're looking at today is really to try and deliver a financial plan without cutting the service levels, but just by using some of these strategies. Just to confirm, the resolutions that were on Monday are not incorporated into what we're looking at today. This will all roll forward together. A reminder of where we're at on our property tax increase at 7%, water rates at 6%, and sewer rates. What I'm recommending council consider today, and I'll walk through how those changes might flow through, is perhaps to reduce the property tax increase to 5.5, but not reducing the reserve contributions. So leave the reserve contributions at that 1.2, but reduce the base increase down to 3.3 instead of 5.8. So we'll walk through the amendments that I would propose and look for council's direction on that. This essentially summarizes revenue, property tax revenue at various property tax rate increases. And so right now at 7% would generate, based on the revised roll calculations, about $20,200,000. If we were to move to a 5.5% increase, it would be a drop of $284,000 in the revenue. So assuming everything is balanced otherwise, that's essentially the amount of net reductions that we would want to see in expenditures, or offset by revenue increases. And there's a little bit of both of those. So of course, if we reduce it this year, then that flows out as well to subsequent years, because each year builds on the previous year. So that essentially illustrates what the impact would be on all 5 years of the plan that council will be considering. There would be that reduction across the board. Just summarizing then where we're at right now for an average single family dwelling, and we went through this on Monday, we're looking at about $158 total increase under the current revenue provisions. So we'll go through some of these details, but some of the significant items that have contributed towards kind of looking at the ability to reduce that property tax increase is, one, that change in the funding of the engineering technician from our operating fund to the capital funding means that essentially we had $100,000 of funding available in operating to reallocate. There was $55,000 of carry forward funds related to the parking lot that didn't get built at the fire hall. And so what we've done is reallocated that to some fire department equipment that they were purchasing this year, and instead use the off-street parking fund for the new city lot that is under consideration. So essentially creating some extra operating funding. Deferring a couple of projects. One was some external painting on Jensen Center next door that our facility staff has assessed is not a critical item for this year, so pushing that out a year. And then deferring some work on the community park, the older beach hut type washroom roof. Again, went down and did an assessment of that and have decided that can be pushed out a year. So again, that's freeing up some funding there. Using the new reserves, the IT equipment replacement reserve, as well as the PCTC reserve for $110,000 and $100,000 of works that were already in the financial plan and the provisional plan. So creating some funding there that were otherwise funded with property taxes. So that created about $445,000 of kind of extra funds, I would say. that then all of the other pluses and minuses kind of offset against this. But these were the significant items that we have identified.
445,000 in savings.
Right.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Go ahead, Councillor Gore.
Yes, thank you. So a lot of the savings is because of the things that have been deferred, just to make it clear. I do want to ask a question about the IT equipment replacement. Jed, again, please refresh my memory, but I think we have a reserve for IT equipment replacement. So why were we tapping into the property taxes for that one?
We didn't have an IT equipment replacement reserve until council approved it as part of this most recent cycle of bylaw and policy. Yeah. So what we're doing this year, if you recall on Monday, was we allocated some of the accumulated surplus to that reserve, kind of as a starting point. Starting in the 26 to 30 financial plan in the fall, we will look at a whole process of funding that every year to average it over 10 years. Again, another smoothing technique to feed in and have those monies available, because the IT equipment is generally quite predictably replaced. It'll be similar to our fleet equipment replacement reserve that we have. They'll be funded the same way. Yeah. Okay.
Councillor Grant, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question around the deferring of these expenses. Are we maybe risking them being more expensive in the next year, or how's that shake out?
I guess we always are. I think the thought right now is it's very unpredictable and very uncertain. So if there's something that isn't critical, so again, looking at all of these projects through a criticality lens, but I think these are a small enough dollar amount that the risk is probably not that significant. Certainly on larger projects, we're probably, well, maybe we should just go ahead, because it seems as though prices don't come down unless it's a tariff item or something like that. But I think it was assessed that these were small enough to be impactful towards the property tax rate, but maybe not impactful in that the cost will be significantly higher. Yeah.
Follow? Go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. And do we see any additional revenue coming on side with some of the changes that have happened? So I guess we don't know when, for example, we may have some of that revenue coming. It might not be this fiscal year or this year, but is there some of that coming on the horizon maybe?
Right. Well, I mean, there are grant programs that we always have our eyes on. And so we're always trying to supplement anything that's otherwise funded by our own reserves or property taxes with grants. But beyond that, you know, there may be, depending what's happening in the development and when things come into our reserve, or sorry, into our role, there may be extra non-market change growth that can come that boosts our, yeah, I think that's unpredictable. And again, certainly in this economic climate, a lot of developers are probably looking and saying, is now the time to be bringing those units on stream? And that's more of a question for our director of planning than me, but yeah, certainly hard to know. Although there seems to be a lot going on, right, in town.
Yes, I would say increased revenue to your question could, you know, from increased assessments with the amount of development that are coming, like actually getting occupancy certificates, and so their assessments are going to be also will be looking to some increase in tax revenue, property tax revenue. That's going to continue. My other point, though, to your question, we have a couple of properties that had a 5-year tax freeze that may or may not be coming up soon, major properties. You probably don't have the information at your fingertips, but I was just wondering when those properties that actually had that tax freeze, when that they're moving to tax freeze as to paying full load. It's coming up soon. I just, maybe it's not quite in 26, but forthcoming.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's very small amount. I think maybe 2 properties took advantage of the containment boundary.
Yep.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Grant, are you satisfied? Yeah.
And just for council's information, our kind of estimate of property taxes assumes a 1% growth, and that was bang on this year. It's not always, but yeah, that's what we have built into the model at this time. Yeah.
Thank you. And Councillor Gore, go ahead.
Thank you. just looking at this slide, Jetta, I want to thank you for being very prudent about giving us the opportunity to defer things that are not critical. With the tariffs and everything, people are not just scared of things getting expensive, but now the property taxes, if we are able to reduce them, it's a really good news for this council and the constituents. So thank you to you and your staff for exploring these opportunities as they come to give people a little break. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that's certainly the whole senior team with lots of communication and everyone looking at their own budgets and saying, where do we have risk and where might there be opportunities to defer or otherwise reduce the cost?
Yes, and I think it's, I'll wait for the end of your presentation anyways before I break into the tax reduction happy dance,
Mhm.
but it may be coming.
Okay.
So prepare yourselves. Okay.
All right. Okay, we'll just move through some of the particulars. And again, most of them are captured within kind of the general categories that we've already discussed. But in terms of general fund, total funding increase of about $427,000. Of course, this doesn't reflect any reduction at this point, but there's some additional grants in here that we'll go through. There was 4 new projects that were funded by grants. So the grant revenue is shown in here. There are some adjustments to developer contributions related to carry forward funds. So a project that was in last year's that has some DCCs related to it is carried forward. So we see an increase now in the amended financial plan. The Beach Fest relocation in the provisional financial plan was shown at $150,000 with $100,000 coming from Parksville and $50,000 from the Beach Fest group. We've increased that budget to 200 now with 100 coming from the Beach Fest, which they had committed to, but that's why there's an increase in other. It's the additional 50,000 on that project. So that's reflected there as well. And yeah, some minor reductions in overall revenue that's also included in that taxation number. There was, as you may know, we have some revenues that come from our utilities that is 1% of their revenues. So we had a reduction in those. So as much as we've had some decreases in costs, there's other adjustments that kind of bring that number down as well. On the expenditure side, we see the general fund expenditures increase by about $700,000. About 442 of that was increases in minor capital related to brand new grant funded projects, as well as adjustments of carry forwards, i.e. additional amounts that have been carried forward. And there is included in that $150,000 contingency related to tariffs that is funded by carry forward surplus. So that's included in that number as well. There's also a contingency amount in there that is an increase over the provisional budget related to the RCMP contract. Their career staff is in contract negotiations with respect to their collective agreements. So we receive communications on that to say, here's the assumptions we've made within the contract estimates. You may want to provide for additional funds in case the settlement is different. So again, using that RCMP reserve to fund that just in case we need it, but hoping that we won't. A lot of the new minor capital projects are just reflected in each of those categories there. In operations and facilities is where we probably had the most adjustments related to wage where they were living. So reallocations amongst the operations departments to really hone in based on where we saw activities and dollars spent in 2024 and reconsidering in light of 2025 work plans. As well as with respect to facilities, actually adding some wage dollars there. What we're finding with the brand new facilities is we've been trying to estimate what it will cost to support those in cleaning and maintenance, as well as many of the aging facilities are taking more. So again, just adjusting those numbers for what we're seeing is actually needed on the ground to deliver that level of service. With respect to general fund non-operating items, so here's where we see the capital expenditures and an increase of about $1.1 million over the provisional. And I'm going to go through the details of that shortly. But most of it is just capital projects that have carried forward. The largest of those is the paving that we were hoping would get done within the weather window last fall, and it didn't quite get done. So that's nearly $1 million of that, most of which was funded by the Growing Communities Fund. And so you'll see a similar increase there on that bottom line where the provisional was 1.3 million. Now it's at 2 million. That's just carrying that Growing Communities Fund funding forward that was in place already. The other restricted reserves that you see that had zero in the 2025 provisional, that's the creation of those new reserves that we've been chatting about, the IT, the PCTC, the RCMP, and that's really adding a line for those new reserve accounts that we're starting to use already. And so finally, the transfers to reserves, you can see have no changes to them. We're maintain that at exactly the same point. The transfer to water and sewer funds increased by $60,000. And if you recall, as part of the provisional, council approved $60,000 towards co-op students that was funded from carry forward. Those have been allocated to our utilities teams. And so that funding is just being transferred to the water and sewer funds to fund those positions. We'll see the other side of it when we look at water and sewer. So when you get down to the bottom line on all of that, you can see that the change generates an unrestricted surplus of $277,000. And so that's where my recommendation and the ability to perhaps reduce the property tax increase could come, because there is some excess money in the year. So that we'll just leave for council's consideration. Looking at the minor capital and capital, as I said, most of those are related to the adjustment of carry forwards going forward. However, there are 4 new projects that were successful grant applications and or provincial funding that's been provided. So the EDMA Indigenous Engagement, we have $42,000 of additional funding, year 2 funding provided. There was a $65,000 grant for Fire Smart to build out a wildfire protection plan, and that's being done in coordination with Town of Qualicum Beach and the Regional District. There was a successful application to UBCM for Community Emergency Preparedness Fund. And so the fire department is buying some equipment with that, $40,000. And then finally, our emergency program, who has historically had a lot of success with UBCM funding in this stream, received $45,900 this year. And that's going towards training and equipment. And so those have all been added into the minor capital or capital plans and are reflected in the schedules that we were just looking at. Looking at capital, this is some of the highlights of those changes. I made reference to the asphalt overlays being carried forward. That was $15,000. The radio tower replacement, another project that we were hoped would be finished last fall, but has carried forward into this year of about $150,000. And then Parksville Pathway allocation that was in last year's being carried forward. That project is moving along, but of course the numbers that we put in each year are estimates. In water, we have the adjustment to the PLC renewal project. If you recall, that's a multi-year project that is about $500,000 in total and is being done across water and sewer and AWS, and mostly is gas tax funded. The funding related to that is mostly offset with reserves. So the IT equipment, the carry forward on the fire department lot, and then moving forward that beach hut replacement or the roof. On the minor capital side, I made reference to the tariff contingency as well as moving the Tech out to be funded with capital funding. And then the patching program also was carried forward. There was some remainder for the asphalt patching from 2024. So those are the increases on the general fund side. With water and sewer, we see a $75,000 tariff contingency in water and a $50,000 contingency in sewer. All of those contingency items being funded with surplus carry forward, so there isn't a net impact on the property taxes or rates. The CCTV that Ayla made reference to is done annually at an approximate cost of $50,000 per storm drainage and sewer. And so that, again, the fall, the weather did not cooperate and some of these projects didn't quite get finished. So what we see in 2025 is twice the amount of work and half of the funding is carried forward. So we'll just see that reflected in the numbers. So for the general fund then, because we're in committee of the whole, they recommended, what I would recommend for your recommendations was that staff reduce the property tax revenue increase from 7% to 5.5% in the amended 2025 to 2029 financial plan and prepare the 2025 property tax rates bylaw to reflect that. And that staff incorporate the changes proposed for the general fund presented in summary by staff at today's meeting into the general fund 2025 to 2029 amended financial plan bylaw.
That's great. Jetta, would you like that recommendation now?
We can do that now. We can do them all at the end, but for efficiency, if you don't have any other questions on the general fund, you could go ahead and make them now.
Okay. But a question before? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Gore.
Thank you, Mayor. Before you put your happy hat on for the property tax.
The dance you got to worry about.
Yeah. So this is to council. Again, I'm grateful that we are able to reduce the property taxes 1.5%. But I just wanted to get a feel what council members think. Just looking at our protective services reserve, and we are only putting aside 0.2%. Just looking at the numbers there, this meager $68,000 a year. And looks like we will be able to bring the taxes down for the entire financial plan for the next 4 years by some percentages. I was wondering if the council is willing to increase that from 0.2 to 0.5% reserve contributions to the protective services at this time.
But my point on this is that Jetta, Ms. Holmes has looked at it and made these recommendations. And I think she's providing the advice to what we need to stay strong on our reserves and so forth. I understand what you're saying. Yeah, but I believe her recommendations are to leave at that to achieve the 5% increase. I would defer to her judgment that this is what she's preparing. Yeah.
Of course, it's at council's discretion. I think we all know that there's lots of need in our protective services. So I think that's completely up to you. There is certainly lots of costs coming that way. I think council's had discussions around the fire hall and there's apparatus and things like that. It's maybe part of a bigger discussion as to the funding for that. I think that we're making good ground on the RCMP side of things with respect to council's motion to set aside any surplus directly that comes from the contract. With respect to the fire services, though, I think it's a more complex analysis for sure. And I would never say no to contributing more to the reserves, but I think in hearing from the community and from council, it is a time of economic uncertainty. And I think why our CAO asked our senior team to really go and look for some of these opportunities to reduce the property tax rate is really reflective of that uncertainty right now. So I think we're trying to provide a balance on that.
Yeah, and I truly appreciate that. And I recognize also for protective services, we did say we're going to defer that discussion for other ones where the staff are actually getting other recommendations to actually increase the funding model to make it more palatable and so forth. And there's a couple of ideas that have come up even since that discussion. So I'm looking forward to that discussion, but I'm certainly in favor of the recommendations of today. But go ahead, Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mayor. Through yourself, thank you, Jetta, so much for all of this. With my short time being elected, I feel like there's kind of two easy routes. One is to spend nothing and have 0% property tax increase. And then when there's bills down the road, you're in trouble. And the other is to spend too much and not be able to pay for it. And I think that there's a delicate nuance balance in the middle. I would like to go with staff's recommendation on this, but I love that we're in this position where we are balancing what we're putting away and we're also balancing what people will need to pay this year. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you.
What I'll
Yeah,
add to the kind of percentage increase, if we can just zip back to this for a minute, is that 1.2% that is a percentage of property taxes each year, that is a kind of a built-in increase, is in addition to the $4 million funding envelope that also goes into contribution to reserves, right? So I feel like, as Councillor Wood said, we're making a lot of ground on the transfers to reserves, and there's more work to be done on that, of course, but I think finding that balance of keeping those percentage increases in place for the reserves and continuing to build on that, because that's how you really see the growth in reserves, is by doing it every single year. And so you can see here that we've got $5 million going into reserves. And so I think the city is making great progress on that, and we'll be bringing more back to council this year after we start looking at funding some of those. What I would also say is that there is still funding that could be allocated within gas tax and within Growing Communities Fund. And so there is some opportunity there for fire halls or apparatus or other infrastructure projects to use some of that available grant funding. And we do have some timing deadlines coming up on that in the next few years. So there's a little bit of wiggle room there as well, that you can maybe feel comfortable with reducing the property taxes a little bit and know that that's there as well. The other part of it is that with us putting money into reserves, the interest and the investments, although the rates have gone down, we're still doing well with that right now. And so I feel like we do have some buffer within the healthy financial position that the city is in right now, although there's lots still to do, that you could probably feel comfortable in reducing that increase for this year, given the economic uncertainty.
Yes, and I agree with the tax decrease, but coupled with the presentation we had with Ayla DeFleur, anyways, with a very aggressive infrastructure projects announced, anyways, that have already been funding has been allocated for all these projects, and it's going to obviously improve our asset management infrastructure that we're so keen on doing, and also keeping our taxes down to a 5.5% increase and going ahead with these projects is very good management on all parts of this. And I know that, Jetta, you're presenting this and I appreciate that, but I know in the background is a whole bunch of other staff that have gone over and above to look at items that were, necessary, that had to be done, or others that maybe they can be deferred, because recognizing the fact that our public are in uncertain times. And I'm just saying that we heard it, but I appreciate the fact that the staff heard that as well. And because we're the ones to just approve it, but you're the ones to do all the work to make this work. So my hat's off to you and all the staff of City Parksville, because this is huge relief to a lot of people in our community that have contacted us and said, it's really tough out there. So
the only thing I would add is of course the rubber hits the road when we actually go to procure this, and that's where even staff is hard. It's hard to know, right? We can do all the planning that we can, and we're trying to build in appropriate contingencies, but it's going to be a bit of a ride this year, even the ride between Monday and today. is enough to keep us going.
Yeah.
So we know we're going to be spending a lot of time looking at the procurement and trying to decide where daily as these things are changing. So what I was trying to communicate in the earlier presentation was that if for whatever reason we're assessing that the costs are gone crazy, that money's still in reserves. And so maybe next year we do even more. But I think just trying to illustrate in a regular world, and hopefully we keep moving forward on that basis. Those are the things that with our best estimates at this time can be funded within the funding that's provided right now for infrastructure renewal.
Right. All we can do with the situation that we have today.
Yeah.
Yeah, to forecast anything further would be foolish. So,
Right.
and that's what we're doing. And we've proven the ability to pivot when necessary.
And I think the other thing to communicate, because of course, I'm completely aware that council needs to provide approval for a 5-year financial plan. We're very focused on the current year because that's what we have in front of us. I haven't spent a lot of time trying to balance out 5 years because that's even harder. So as much as possible, we're trying to build in contingencies there as well. But I think this year especially, we just really need to focus on what can we do this year, given the economic uncertainty that is present. And come the fall, we'll revisit what we're doing in the next 5.
Excellent. Okay, CAO Kaler. Yes, please.
Thank you. Through the mayor, I just wanted to share, really appreciate the gratitude from council to staff, but I did want to just share our gratitude back to council, because one of the things that allowed us to take this second look and analyze and evaluate where we could save was that council was so diligent in getting us approvals basically by the end of last year. Normally, for those that have been on council before, we would still be kind of in the thick of our budgets this time of year. And we would not really have had the breathing room to be able to look and reevaluate what was approved kind of by the end of December. And so I really want to thank council for their confidence in us, but also all of those extra meetings that you did in the fall, all of the questions and all of that consultation that happened early allowed us to be flexible on this and respond to what is very tumultuous times. And I think everybody agreed on staff that we wouldn't have been able to come up with these suggestions if council wasn't working with us so well and approving things based on our recommendations, but approving them quickly and early so that we are able to look at when we get the assessment roll, for example, or when we get other grants, we're well ahead. Like we don't have to have this approved until May. But because you approved it really in December, we had January and February where we knew things were going to be coming at us from neighbors to the south. And we were able to just take that time. And I really appreciate that. And all of our senior team were talking about how this council has been just so easy to work with in terms of being open-minded, giving us a lot of critical feedback, and just doing things in a really timely manner that allows us to have that breathing room. And we're not doing 3 special meetings to try and get our bylaw adopted in May, which I've been through several times. So I'm really grateful for your support of us, but I think council deserves some recognition in this as well. So I just wanted to share that from our senior team.
Thank you for that, CAO Kaler. I have to say that this council has proven its ability to be politically adept at what's happening in not just in British Columbia, but in the world. And bringing that focus to the table here to recognize that what we need to do, and maybe some of our projects and some of the things that we wanted to do, maybe was not the time to bring them forward. And so thank you to the great team effort of this council, because it's proven. We have good discussions and we've had a lot of meetings and our heads have been hurting at the end of it. But at the same time, we've come to an agreement. We've come together as a team approach to support our staff who also work in team approach as well. So together we can do great things. Thank you. Councillor Beal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the question from Councillor Gore regarding, whether or not we're putting aside, or should we put a little more towards protective services, knowing what might be coming down the pipe. But with that, I really appreciate the reassurance from our finance department that is being considered, and for a number of reasons that we should be in good shape, and that there are also these pots that we can draw on if we need to add to that. So at the end of the day, I really do think that our residents will appreciate a reduction in the anticipated property tax rate. And it seems like, you know, when we're in great shape and good hands, and I know both Councillor Gore and myself, along with the mayor, attended a meeting this morning to look at the auditor's report, and it's just very, very reassuring. So thank you for that. And again, I think that the public will really appreciate seeing a reduction in the property tax anticipation.
Great.
Thank you. And I can confirm the auditor showed no issues with the final report. In fact, he was very pleased with the amount of cooperation he got with all of our financial staff, and as well as having all the information ready. And basically was very impressed, and you were in good shape. The audit committee questioned a number of items, and to get to where we felt comfortable that everything was being done actually over and above what we need to be done. And that was just the level we've expected. So that was from the audit committee today that we haven't had the time to report out on, but we're satisfied with our fiscal responsibility that's been handled by our finance department. Councillor Martin, you had it. Everything's okay. Councillor Martin, good to hear. Thank you.
That's fantastic. That's certainly with the leadership of our manager of finance, Marley, and yeah, she does a fantastic job.
Yeah, thank you. Are you ready to go with?
Yeah, the committee want to make this recommendation now and of course, always understanding that at our April 23rd meeting, council will have an opportunity just to give that one last thought as well. So if you're happy to go ahead with this now, we'll keep it moving forward.
Yeah, I think I'll make the recommendation as mayor anyways, if I could, Amit, just to look at. Yes, so I'd like to make the recommendations, both number 1 and number 2, that staff reduce the property tax revenue increase from 7% to 5.5% in the amended 2025 to 2029 financial plan, and prepare the 2025 to property tax rates bylaw to reflect that increase, as well as number 2, that staff incorporate the chances proposed for the general fund presented in summary by staff at the April 9th, 2025 Committee of the Whole meeting into the general fund 2025 to 2029 financial plan bylaw. Do I have a seconder for that, please? Seconded by Councillor Gore. Any discussion? Comments? Councillor Grimes, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one comment in this time of uncertainty. I think adding some predictability is amazing. Obviously, having a lower property tax increase is great, but having a consistent sort of 5-ish% increase, when you look back at the increases over time, I think it just speaks to the stability and an approach to the city, which I think creates more certainty for people as they decide whether to live or invest in Parksville. So great to see that.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Grimes. Councillor Wood, did you have your hand up or not? Okay. You're okay. No further discussion? All those in favor? Carries unanimous. Thank you. And then carry on, Jetta, and then we'll.
Great. So just to run through the water fund and sewer fund, and there's even fewer changes in this than in the general fund. With respect to the water fund, we see an increase in total revenues of $52,000. And what this is an adjustment to the parcel tax number. Again, something that we estimate in October, but now we know the final numbers that will be billed the parcel tax on the property tax notice. And there is that transfer that I referenced earlier with respect to from the general fund to the water fund for the funding related to the co-op students. On the expenditure side, we've got an increase of $241,000. Included in here is the cost of the co-op students, a couple of contingency amounts, both for general water fund of $75,000. There's also a contingency of an additional $100,000 related to ERWS, because that's a very significant part of our expenditures. And I just really want to cover that out as well, both though funded from surplus, so no net effect. And then just the carry forwards related to minor capital and capital. Looking here, you'll see the transfers to reserves are unchanged. Some increase in transfer from reserves related to the capital and minor capital. And then just a minor decrease actually in the capital expenditures, just adjusting for carry forward items there. What you see at the bottom is not a very significant change in the annual cash surplus or deficit. So I would recommend that we just leave the rate increase at 6% for water for now and not change that. What I know for sure in the water is there's lots of needs on the infrastructure side coming up. And we know we also have the drinking water master plan that's underway. So I would be reluctant to reduce this. We will be looking at the whole structure of this as we move forward on our water infrastructure, because it's not quite as easy as the property taxes, in which case we apply a percentage increase and it typically generates that amount of money. The water revenue is impacted by people's own conservation, by the weather, by all kinds of things. So looking at the structure of water rates is something on our work plan coming up. So I would suggest it just stays where it's at for 2025. Again, not much change in water and sewer for their minor capital or capital, and it really is just mostly the adjustment of the carry forward amounts. So for the water fund, similar recommendations, only in this case, leaving the rate increase at 6% as it is in the already adopted financial plan, and that you recommend to council to incorporate the changes that have been provided in summary to create the amended financial plan.
Anybody like to just carry on? Okay, so let's just stick with it. I would like to make the following recommendations. That staff maintain the water rates increase at 6% in the amended 2025 to 2029 water fund financial plan and prepare the amended water utility rates bylaw to reflect that increase. And part two, that staff incorporate the changes proposed for the water utility fund presented in summary by staff at the April 9th, 2025 committee of the whole meeting into the water utility fund 2025 to 2029 financial plan bylaw. I have a second for that. Second by Councillor Bill. Any further discussion? Yes, go ahead, Councillor Gore. Could we go back to slide, please? Thank you. You okay? Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Looking at the sewer fund, very similar changes to water in that on the revenue side, we have an adjustment for the actual count of the parcel taxes. So a small adjustment of $2,600 there. I also noted in my very final review before the meeting is that transfer from general fund is missing $37,000. So in the final version, that will be $43,000 and not $6,000. So my apologies for that error, but if we can incorporate that going forward and you trust in me to do the math properly, that would be great. And then the other thing that we have on the expenditure side is just that tariff contingency funded by surplus of $50,000 in the sewer fund, and then an adjustment related to the minor capital items carried forward. There may also, prior to the April 23rd meeting, I'm waiting for the RDN to finalize their numbers. What they do in their own financial plan is it's based on a roll that they haven't received yet by the deadline that they have to adopt their plan by. So we received the revised roll on March 31st, and that's what the tax rates are based on. But the RDN has to have their financial plan adopted by the 31st. So those two don't line up very well. So in the final version of theirs, they can approve the financial plan in total, but the actual allocations to each municipality or each function's participants are adjusted once they receive the revised roll. So it's possible that that RDN wastewater number that we have to pay for our sewer fund may be tweaked depending on that. So if there's any significant change in that, and I feel like we need a rate change, we still have our meeting on April the 23rd for me to bring that forward to council at that time. But with the information we have now, I wouldn't recommend changing the rate increase in the sewer fund as well.
So for clarification, Jenna, then there's the first line there, the RDN wastewater property taxes, that 3451.
So it's partially that, and it's partially in that treatment and disposal expense number, because we collect some of it through the property taxes and some of it through our rates for the revenue side. And then on the expenditure side, it's in that $3.9 million treatment and disposal number.
Okay,
Yeah.
and those are like, because there are RDN numbers that are going to be supplied to us at a date
Right.
after this, possibly tweaked.
Yeah, Tiffany was hoping to get it to me today, but I think they're still working through their numbers. So I'll
Yeah.
bring that to council for confirmation on April 23rd, but I'm hoping it won't be significantly different.
Thank you.
So looking at this, again, transfers to reserves are unchanged. Transfers from reserves reflect the carry forward number, as well as that $50,000 contingency funding out of surplus, and just a slight adjustment in the capital expenditures related to the carry forwards. Again, not a significant change in the bottom line, so I would recommend we stay at the 6%. Again, this is one we'll look at going forward. The sewer rates are even one more level more complex because they're based on water consumption. And so changing the water structure necessitates a change and possibly in the sewer structure as well for the rates. And if you recall from our conversation about reserves and accumulated surplus on Monday, is that the sewer fund isn't as healthy as the water in general. And so it is likely something where we need to start to build some more reserves in sewer. But for now, we'll move forward on this basis until we kind of bring you back some of that information this year with respect to funding the replacement of sewer infrastructure and things, because the master plan certainly indicated there was significant funding need there. So I think for now, leave it at the 6%. That would be my recommendation. And this year we'll be digging into that a little bit more on the rate side of things. Any questions on the sewer fund? If not, there's essentially the same recommendations as for the water fund.
Thank you. And I'd like to move the following recommendations to council, that the number one, that staff maintain the sanitary sewer rates increase at 6% in the amended 2025 to 2029 sanitary sewer fund financial plan, and prepare the amended sanitary sewer rates bylaw to reflect that increase. And part two, that staff incorporate the changes proposed for the sanitary sewer fund presented in summary by staff at the April 9th, 2025 Committee of the Whole meeting into the sanitary sewer fund 2025 to 2029 financial plan bylaw. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Councillor Grenz. Any further discussion? All those in favor? That carries. Thank you.
Okay. The last part of our financial plan, if you recall, it's 4 parts, is our equipment replacement reserve. We're not proposing any amendments to this at all. And not that we don't expect there's going to be some uncertainty in this. It's just completely impossible to try and estimate what the impacts might be on that. What we do know is that our most significant purchase of the year, the backhoe, we've already done, and it came in under budget. So I'm not even looking to amend that and adjust. So as I messaged on Monday, we'll be looking at all of these with a really critical eye. I don't know that there's anything on the replacement list that is critical. So if the prices we're finding are way higher than what we've budgeted or what our fleet folks thinks is reasonable, we'll just push it off a year and there's not really any critical need to replace. So that we'll just monitor through the year. The other side of that is if there is something significant comes up, there's a healthy balance in the reserve. And so there's funding there if we needed to come back to council during the year to address that. So I think no recommendation needed here. We'll just, as part of the financial plan that comes back, there won't be any changes to that one.
Thank you.
Whoa, look at us before 4 o'clock. So next steps will be April the 23rd, where the recommendations from today will come forward to council for one last consideration. On your SharePoint folder is the detail of the minor capital and capital that's been updated for the changes that we talked about today. So if you want to look at that in detail anymore, and certainly there'll be an opportunity if you've got any more questions at all on the April 23rd. From there, we'll go ahead with drafting the bylaws for 3 readings at the May the 5th regular meeting.
Thank you, Jenna.
Okay.
I'm going to ask, is there any questions from the audience regarding the financial plan? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jenna. Thank you, everybody. Well done, everyone. Do I have a mover or a seconder for adjournment? Moved by Councillor Bill, second by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? It carries unanimous. Great work, everyone. Thank you.